welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States and also former head of the GAO. And today we're going to look at the Doge report and see what's going on with Doge, because we're getting a lot of conflicting information. For example, they say that Doge says they've saved $55 billion. Did they really? The Wall Street Journal says they saved $2 billion. And some people say it haven't saved anything because they don't have the power to save anything, because that's up to Congress. They control the purse strings. And then on top of it, there's a lawsuit that's going on right now. 14 states have sued Doge, saying that it's unconstitutional because of the appointments clause in the Constitution. In other words, they were never ratified by the Senate. So here we have the circus has come to town, and it's in Washington, D.C. We don't have a circuit master, but we do have one of the few leaders in Washington, D.C., the Honorable David M. Walker, former Comptroller General of the United States, to basically give us help in this particular area. So we're going to turn it over to David to give us some real insight to Doge, because I see the things on TV, and unfortunately they're too quick, on, off, and not in depth at all. So hopefully we'll have a more in-depth report on what's going on with Doge. So take it away, David.
Nick, it's good to be with you. You know, there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation about Doge coming from both sides, both the proponents of Doge and the opponents of Doge. In fact, later today, I'm going up to Capitol Hill. I'm going to be talking to one of the co-chairs of the Doge caucus on Capitol Hill. You know, as I've said many times, I support the need to engage in a comprehensive review and reassessment of what the government does, how the government does it. It's clearly a bloated bureaucracy. It clearly needs to be right-sized and modernized. And while I support intellectually what Doge is trying to do, I've got serious concerns about how they're going about it. But let's talk a little bit about some issues and then get into some interaction. First, contrary to what the original plan was to have them be outside of government, they're inside of government. They're part of the White House complex. Elon Musk is the leader of it, meaning the intellectual leader of it. He is a special government employee. There's supposed to be an administrator who would be a government employee who would report to Susie Wiles, who's the chief of staff to the president, and who obviously would work very closely with Elon Musk, but then try to plan and coordinate the execution of their work across the government. It doesn't appear that they've named an administrator yet. They clearly need one, because the people who are doing the work for Doge so far have little to no government experience, and it shows. If they do have an administrator now, they haven't named it, and they haven't made it public. I'm sorry. They need a new one because things aren't going too well with regard to how they're communicating. You know, my view is that there needs to be much more transparency about what they're doing, where they're doing it, who's doing it, and what are they finding. You know, the Doge is clearly, I think, in many cases, overstating their quote unquote savings. And the reason that they're overstating their savings is they can find contracts that they cancel, but the only way that the monies can be cut from the budget is if the Congress approves it. And in that regard, the president has to file a impoundment request. The Congress has 45 days to decide what to do with it. If they do nothing, they can't, it's not cut. And so, in other words, it may free up money to be spent on something else, but it doesn't result in an absolute reduction in spending. There's one major exception to that, and that is reductions in force. To the extent that you have hiring freezes and to the extent that you have reductions in force, Congress gives you a maximum number of people that you can have in a particular department or agency, but not a minimum. And so, therefore, to the extent that they don't hire more people, or to the extent that they end up conducting reductions in force, you can save money immediately on that. And that's what they're doing right now, although there can be adverse consequences for those reductions in force, because in some cases, you're getting rid of good people. with the kind of skills and knowledge that you need, and who may be better performers. Ironically, believe it or not, when somebody transfers one agency to another, or even gets a promotion, they're back in a new probationary period. And you would think that the people who are getting a promotion are probably some of your better people. So they're going to have to work through some of these issues. If you look on the debt clock, which is online, they're claiming that Doge has saved something like 110 to 120 billion dollars, which is just absolutely absurd. I don't know where they get that number, but they ought to take it down off their clock because it's got no credibility whatsoever. Doge has claimed that they've saved 55 billion, but again, without providing enough evidential matter, and that number is way overstated as well, because I'm sure that probably includes a lot of contracts that they've canceled. But as I said before, unless Congress rescinds, the appropriation, part of the appropriation for it, then you haven't cut anything. 75,000 employees ended up taking the early out option, the fork in the road, whatever you want to call it. But we don't save any money on that because they're getting paid through the end of the year, not just salary, but also benefits. But obviously that'll save money next year, if you will. And now there appears to be some dissension within the administration with regard to some of Doge's actions and activities. Elon Musk, talked about sending out an email to every employee in the federal government asking them to list 5 things that they did and hopefully accomplished last week. But several cabinet officials and other department heads told their employees to ignore it. And so the bottom line is that, I think it's really important for Doge to, kind of step back and be able to get better organized, to be able to be more targeted about what they're doing, more transparent about what they're doing, and frankly, more truthful with regard to what they're finding. I think that's important. The opponents of Doge, on the other hand, are arguing that they're engaging in illegal or unconstitutional activity without any credible, support for that claim. I mean, the president has the right to appoint officials to do duties that he assigns to that person. The White House staff is comprised of individuals with a lot of power who don't have to be confirmed by the Senate. The chief of staff is not confirmed by the Senate. The national security advisor is not confirmed by the Senate. The head of the Domestic Policy Council is not confirmed by the Senate. So the idea that Elon Musk has not been confirmed by the Senate is a bogus idea. You don't have to be. There's lots of people in government, including at the deputy assistant secretary level and similar, that aren't confirmed by the Senate. And what's evident is that, the president is actually making the decisions here. That what's happening is that is bringing things to the attention of the president, and the president is saying, do this, do that, and that's what's happening, and that's unprecedented. We've had situations in the past. We've had the Grace Commission. We've had various other, reinventing government, whatever else. But what's different about Doge is that they're doing things at lightning speed, and they're getting decisions on a day-to-day basis directly from the president of the United States about what to do. I will tell you this. There's a lot of people in Washington and the surrounding areas that are very nervous, not just government employees, but also contractors, because they don't know whether and to what extent they're going to be affected by this. Doge has now gone to the Defense Department. There's going to be, reductions in forces there. And frankly, it's time that we take a hard look at the Defense Department, both on the military side as well as the civilian side, because when you look at the number of flag officers we have, and when you look at the size of the civilian workforce versus what's happened on the military side, you can see there's plenty of opportunities to be able to have reductions without compromising national security. And so, I hope that the Defense Business Board, which I'm on, had the opportunity to participate in that because I've been arguing for years that we need to fundamentally review and reassess, what we're doing in the Defense Department, and that's both on the operator side as well as on the business side. One last thing on that, the president has said, and Elon Musk has too, and the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has said that they're bound and determined that they want to get an opinion on the Department of Defense's financial statements during this president's term, which means within 4 years. That's going to be a challenge, and we'll see whether that happens, because the DOD is the tail on the dog of being able to get an opinion on the consolidated financial statements of the United States. So those are a few opening comments. Happy to interact, with you and others about other issues of concern.
Yeah, we're going to be discussing on Lawyers Den the constitutionality of the Doge, because right now 14 states have filed lawsuits against Doge, saying it was unconstitutional based on the appointments clause. Okay, and their arguments, I read through their arguments the other day. Their argument is that the Doge is moved to the level of a cabinet position because of the nature of what they're doing. I believe they asked for a TRO. I believe it was struck down by the district court. So this thing is in play, but I think your arguments are correct. In other words, he has the right to appoint people. Not everybody is a cabinet member. So I think that those 14 states that filed suit are going to have some problems with that. Another interesting phenomenon that came up is
on that real quick. Piggyback on when you go. Yeah. If they didn't win at the district court level, they're going to lose.
Right. They lost at the district court.
The higher up you go, the less favorable the courts are.
Right. They're actually now odds on. They did a study on appeals. If you lost a case, your odds of having it reversed are 25% or less. So once you lose at the lower court level, your odds on favor, you're not going to get the Supreme Court to overturn it. But I didn't see their arguments. They're trying to. They all remember there are 14 attorney generals who filed this suit. They're all clamoring that the Doge has too much power and they need to be confirmed by the Senate. But we're going to see how that plays out. But right now, it doesn't look too good. Here's another interesting phenomenon that's happened. California had the wildfires, so they want to go to Congress and ask for $40 billion. Now, wait a minute. If we just saved $55 billion and they get $40 billion, we're not going anywhere, David. Okay. In other words, and then we also have that dividend of $5,000 per person, which will amount to over $500 billion. Now we're not like going anywhere; we're going in reverse. So the thing is,
let's talk about those two things real quick, and then we'll keep
okay. Right.
First, no way in hell California should get $40 billion. They grossly mismanaged the situation by not maintaining the forest, by mismanaging the water situation. The federal government is not an insurance company for those kinds of activities. And so I don't know. I'm sure they'll end up getting something, but there's no way in the world that they should get that kind of money. Secondly, let's talk about the so-called Doge dividend. And I've been pretty outspoken on this in social media. You don't provide a dividend when you're losing $2 trillion a year and $5.5 billion a day. In addition to that, you don't provide a rebate when the things that the products or services involved have not been fully paid for. Generally, companies that do that kind of thing go bankrupt. It's a dumb idea. It's all politics, pandering. And the fact is no way you're going to get anywhere close to that $5,000 number, because the amount of money you would have to save is huge. And while Doge can save some money, a modest amount of money, it's nowhere close to the amount that would be necessary in order to provide $5,000 per household. So it's just another dumb idea, and it needs to die a quick death.
Yeah, we're running a poll on LinkedIn Pod TV right now, and On LinkedIn right now, 85% of the viewers say California should not get 40 billion. I mean, part of it is they're going to millionaires and billionaires to rebuild their homes. And you're right. They have insurance for that. If they don't, well, as they say, too bad. But everybody has their hand out, David. I mean, the hands are all out, in spite of the fact the government's broke. Well, we do have some other people that have their hands out, and their hands are up right now. We're going to bring in some of our producers. We have Sasha Starr from Canada. We have Jatovi from the United States of America, and also we have Mark Lee from the USA. And I see the hands are up and the hands are out. And we have Kim Calhoun from the USA. So we have quite a crew today. We're talking about Doge. It's really hard to get the correct information. And I believe the information that's coming from the Doge site is not correct. When they say, hey, we're going to save 55 billion. I'm like, David, okay, where is it? Jatovi, you had your hand up first. So speak or forever hold thy peace. You got to be unmuted.
I guess this gets back to, the same, dead horse that I keep beating every week about what Doge is, what powers they have. I mean, they're more than just an advisory committee, as they are taking ownership of particular things. And this is where it gets back to, where is the oversight? I know you said that there was oversight last week, but I still have yet to see any oversight on Doge at all.
Well, I don't know that I said there was any oversight, because I don't think there is any oversight. I don't think Congress is conducting any effective oversight of Doge. There is a Doge caucus, all right, and they do interact with Doge, but there haven't been any real oversight hearings. And again, I mean, who's going to testify on behalf of Doge? Presumably, it would be the administrator, but I don't even know if they have an administrator. And it's pretty clear that while Elon has a lot of influence, there's no question, and he's got direct access to the president. It's pretty clear that while he's making the recommendations, the president's making the decisions. But as I said, there's a crack in the armor within the last 24 hours, because you've got several cabinet level officials of the president who've been confirmed by the Senate, who have said ignore the request that came out to provide 5 things that you did and accomplished last week. And so we'll see what ends up happening going forward. There needs to be more oversight. There's no question about it.
By the way, that's a good point, because, David, the Doge doesn't have jurisdiction over those employees.
No.
So the thing is, Elon Musk can jump up and down, give me this, give me that, but Elon Musk is not their boss, so they don't have. He doesn't have jurisdiction over that. Well, listen to what our friends in Canada, our 51st state, has to say.
Let me mention real quickly. Hold on one second. You make a good point. Elon is not in line management. The only people that he has direct influence over are the Doge operation. Okay, all he can do is make recommendations with regard to RIFs, with regard to other activities, with regard to canceling contract. He's not the decision maker, and the problem is from people that I've talked to, the Doge people are being very assertive. And they're saying, you will cancel this, you will cancel that, you will, terminate all these, probationary employees. And again, there needs to be oversight of this to find out whether or not that's something that the president personally approved. And if it is, then it's valid. If it's not, then you can question it.
Okay, our 51st state, Canada.
David,
Sasha.
sorry, some noise. David, there is a contradiction when you say that Elon Musk is making only recommendations. But his people who are directly under him, they are doing much more than recommendations. They are destroying actually all system of US government. Whether it's a good system or not is another point. But what authorities they have, the orders from Elon Musk, but Elon Musk has only advisory role. So how it all works, I think this is a power grab by Trump, Musk, and others, which is completely uncontrolled. They are harassing federal employees. The next letter he will send, the next tweet will be, I know what you did last summer. I would like to see that.
Well, you make a good point, Sasha. I mean, here's the key: they need to be much more transparent about what they're doing, who's doing it, and on whose orders. Okay, you're correct, and Nick and others are correct in saying that Elon Musk by himself can't order people to do things, and his people can't do it either, unless, for example, what's happened is Elon has gotten has gotten an okay from the president. And clearly the president can. The president has the right to right size an agency. He doesn't have the right to terminate an agency. Okay. So we'll see. Again, we need more oversight. And one of the reasons I'm going up to the Hill is to talk about that.
Yeah. Mark,
yeah. How much mismanagement do you think there are in some of the newer agencies and everything like that? Because one thing that I mentioned on the news show earlier that fascinated me, because I was watching News Nation this morning and everything, with this notion that Kristi Noem has apparently spent $200 million to basically tell the fine folks from Latin America, if you're a criminal, don't bother to come here and everything. So the ad, and I did see the ad that they showed a clip of it, reminded me of the infamous Willie Horton ad and everything along those lines. But that's a lot of money to be spending basically to tell the fine folks from Guatemala that are drug lords not to come here and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, are we going to see that kind of oversight even in that kind of agency? Because I'm going like, that's a lot of money for an ad campaign to South America.
Well, first, I have seen an ad. I have not heard about how much the ad costs. That's a perfect example of something that ought to be subject to oversight. There's no question about that. Okay. I mean, I think you could say that, having some type of a communication campaign that might involve an ad in order to try to stem the flow and get the message, that sounds like a lot of money. I would be surprised if they're spending that kind of money, but again, I don't know.
It was reported on several of the networks. It actually came out, I think, over the weekend that it was $200 million that they spent on this particular ad campaign. So that just kind of like raised red flags to me and everything. As one
you can't believe everything you read. Okay.
I heard it was 5 million, but it should be 0, because you should just tell Elon Musk to put it on his Twitter account. It's free.
Some of these people I don't think use Twitter, but or X.
Yeah, but they're all on Facebook. So anyway, Jatobi, you have something.
I had brought this up earlier because getting back to the Doge issue, and I think the way Elon is being set up now is the way that they're trying to give an off-ramp for Donald Trump and all the things that are going on. Because with all the blowback now starting to hit with the cuts that are happening, which a lot of people are some people are starting to get upset about. There were a few Republican senators and House members that went back to their districts and got booed and yelled at and all this other stuff. So there's starting to be a small groundswell. And I think they are setting Elon to be that fall guy. Hence the reason why when that email happened, you had that little bit of pushback now where they said, don't follow that. So the crack that is there, I think, is a manufactured crack more so than an actual real crack that's there. What is your opinion on that, Dave?
Well, the president and Elon appear to be pretty darn close. I mean, they've appeared together multiple times within the last week. The president has defended Elon. The most recent thing of concern is when he ended up, saying that if you don't end up answering this memo, you're going to be terminated, if you will. And then when several of the department heads said you don't have to respond to that memo, that to me was significant. And what the implications of that are going to be, I don't know. I just reinforce what I said. They need somebody who's got credibility on both sides of the aisle, who's had some actual experience with real government transformation, to be appointed as administrator, to help them be more targeted, more transparent, and more truthful with regard to what they're doing, who's doing it, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, and what they're finding. I think the ship can be righted, okay, but I think that is a critical element in order to right the ship. And I think that it's important that if they are finding things that should be rescinded, that they have a strategy to try to get that tacked on to the budget reconciliation bill in order to get Congress to act on it in that manner, because that's the most logical way to get it done.
David, I have a question to you. Something about the two largest expenditures of U.S. are military budget and interest paid on its debt. Okay, so the debt is about to be controlled by Musk and others. I doubt it very much, but at least that's what we believe. They need some time to bring it all in order. We'll see. Now, about military budget. When Trump is now and his people saying that only those countries that are paying up will be defended by U.S., so does it mean that U.S. is becoming a mercenary army that is available for hire? So they have to announce a price list. What services are they providing? How much the services cost? So the country will be on a marketplace. Okay, we need mercenaries. Okay, who is there ready? Okay, U.S. Okay, send us 50,000 troops, so many tanks, and so many other stuff. Thank you very much. Where do we have to pay? Done deal. So is that a transformation of U.S. Army what we are seeing? Because if it's not that model, I don't understand why they need 800 bases around the world, where they, they had enough wars, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. It's just more than enough. They don't need any more wars which they cannot win. So at what point, what are they doing at the negotiating table between Russia and Ukraine, sitting there by what rights? I mean, this country is $36.5 trillion worth of debt. So what are they doing at the table over there? Who are they? Who asks them to negotiate? And in fact, these negotiations, it's one-sided. They're siding with Russia on all points. And Russia has not made even one single concession. Ukraine, no NATO for you, or you have to agree to this, you have to dismantle your army eventually. That's a despicable situation. I don't think even American people will go for it. We'll see in the next few months. And my prediction is there will be no peace talks, no successful peace talks. There will be no peace in the near future.
All right. Well, that's a lot of stuff. All right. Several things. Number one.
And I don't charge for it anything.
Oh, no, that's good. And I don't either. But, the fact is that Trump has made it very clear that we do not want to be a mercenary army. In fact, he doesn't want us to be involved in as many conflicts as we have been in the past. Secondly, it's also been made very clear under no circumstances are we sending troops to, for example, Ukraine. Why is the U.S. involved? Russia fears us. They don't fear Europe. They don't fear Ukraine. They fear us. that's why we're involved. My personal view is that in negotiations, sometimes what you'll do is you'll have one-on-one conversations on each side, and you need to do it on each side before you bring everybody together. We'll see. I've said all along that I think that Ukraine's going to end up in a stalemate, and I think that what's going to end up happening is that there's going to be a cessation of hostilities, similar to what the situation was in the Korean Peninsula, that the Russians are going to still occupy part of what used to be Ukraine, and the 80% of Ukraine that's not occupied by Russia will be an independent entity. I don't think it'll be admitted into NATO. I'm interested to see what type of security arrangement that might be entered into. As all of us on this call know, that there was an agreement that was done between the United States, Russia, and Britain that supposedly provided security for Ukraine. But then in 2014, Russia invaded and took over Crimea, and nothing was done about it. So in my view, if you want to have a credible security arrangement, short of NATO membership, which I don't think will happen, I think you have to have a treaty. I think you have to have a treaty that is approved by the Congress with Ukraine. And maybe that's what they have in mind. I don't know. But let me come back to the bigger picture, Sasha, that you made, which I think is a good point. I fundamentally think that we need to fundamentally reassess our force structure, our footprint, our platforms, and many different elements based upon current and future threats rather than past. I think we have too many bases. I think we need to change the alignment of our forces. I think we need to recognize the reality that today, because of satellites, there's total visibility of the battlefield. If you've got something that's above the waterline, it can be seen from space. And I think that we have to be moving much more towards unmanned vehicles. We're talking about building, 3 more aircraft carriers when we already have more than everybody else in the world combined. And when you build an aircraft carrier, you've got to build a bunch of other ships that make up the task force. And yet total visibility of the battlefield, as the Air Force, what the Air Force calls the Navy, is targets. I think we need to reconsider that, if you will. So I'm for a fundamental review and reassessment, so that we can have a military that is a clear deterrent towards conflicts, but quite frankly, is more cost effective than it is today. Much more.
David, because of these huge expenditures, how come that Elon Musk is not going after Pentagon, U.S. Army?
He is.
Is he?
There's now a DoD Doge. You can get, and I've communicated with it because I'm on the Defense Business Board, and I told them you really ought to be having the Defense Business Board help, with regard to this effort, because it's something I've been calling for 20 years. That we needed to do this, but no administration, including the first Trump term, took this on. It's time to take it on. But it's not just what you do, but how you do it that matters. And that's where there needs to be a course correction. Okay.
Well, and I would like to step in and thank you, David, for taking the time to go and address these problems, because it is your experience and your knowledge base that could go in and probably intervene and add some common sense to what's going on. And I think, you know what, they came in swinging the blade. They wanted to prove that they can get a lot done in one time. But sometimes when you come in aggressively like what they're doing, you're going to cause more damage and harm than good. And one of the places I see a lot of the damage happening is TSA. And I've watched this for years, where you can go in to a company and everything's running fine, even though you have old resources and tools. People know how to do that dance to make it run like a fine-tuned machine. And you have the TSA, and we're seeing the results of coming in and doing hiring freezes and layoffs and firing, and the ripple effect and impact that that can have on an industry that's already run down, overworked, understaffed. And they're, those people, they're just going to say, you know what, we're tired, we're done. There's nothing else we can do. And, I travel a lot, and I predicted this was going to happen. The minute that they put people in charge that have no merit whatsoever in running a TSA and running a fine-tuned solution like this. But when you come in and you do hiring freezes and you start jolting these people who, our lives are in their hands, you're going to see exactly what we're seeing now. And that's airplanes coming down, chaos at the airport. I have literally witnessed a lot of chaos, unnecessary chaos. It's one thing when you have bad weather, and this is not the time to do some of the changes they're doing. But what he should have done was come in and go, you know what? I know we have issues here. Let's sit down. Let's talk about what needs to happen. He shouldn't have come in with the swing blade, do any circus act of going, oh, we're doing all of this. He should have come in and just said, how do we make things better for TSA? And don't ever cut corners in an organization like TSA. That is not the place to do that. I mean,
I can't comment on what's happened to TSA, but you know what TSA used to stand for, right? The joke, thousands standing around. But again, we're coming back to, we need to be a little bit more targeted with regard to what's being done, if you will. The last thing I'd say on that, and then we go to Jatovi, is you need a copy of my new book up on your mail.
Oh yeah, I know, and I actually just bought it.
You got the best-selling one up there.
Yeah, I got the new one actually. I got the new book.
It's not up there. Okay, that's fine.
No, I just bought the new book. I'm hoping to get you to sign it if we meet at Zero Week, and maybe bring a couple of copies to hand out to people if you are able to come, because that's where you get the real information from some of the real resources. But I agree that it's always had problems. TSA has always had problems, but I just think we're seeing a ripple effect of what happens when you just come in swinging a blade rather. And you know what? I get it. You want to do that to the banks? Fine. That doesn't kill me, right? It might kill my finances, but it doesn't kill me. But swinging a blade in a transit system kills people. You're just going to see it.
Jatovi.
There were two things that I wanted to touch on real quick. Both were similar to what both Sasha and Kim had just talked about. One was a disagreement with what you were saying about Ukraine, but more of an agreement with what Sasha's saying, because Trump is he is a transactional person, and he has pushed for those transactions. Even during the campaign, said that if you don't pay, we will not protect you. So it is that mercenary mentality that we're going to be living up under if they don't pay. And then on top of that, with the situations where saying that we don't want to expand our footprint, that's why we're trying to retreat, yet we're trying to take over Panama again, take over Greenland, and take over Canada. And he's also talked about putting in, he hasn't ruled out the idea around soldiers to go in from Panama and these places. That's increasing our footprint, which is not there. He's also talked about Gaza and increasing our footprint there. So it's more of a takeover mentality and retreating from particular areas, because there's the conflict with Russia. You cannot have a negotiation with the aggressor without having the aggressor have any concessions, because there literally are no concessions that Russia has to make at this point. He's made public all the Ukrainian concessions. He's demanded and even called for a new election and to kick Zelensky out, which Zelensky actually responded. You get us in NATO, I'll retire from my position. So there are pressures on Ukraine. There are concessions Ukraine has to make, but there's absolutely nothing that Russia has to make, because it hasn't been announced. It hasn't been sold. Anybody who's asked, it's always time will tell. You'll have to see. But when you ask about Ukraine, they have to give up 50% and so on and so forth. So there are concessions there. So I disagree with
first, Trump is a non-traditional president. He is a disruptor. Okay. He says a lot of things. Okay. He says a lot of things, and a lot of those things get walked back. For example, this weekend, the National Security Advisor made it very clear that the United States is committed to NATO. It's committed to support NATO. Trump wants the NATO countries to do more to do a greater part with regard to paying more money for defense. That's really what it is. It's not paying money to NATO. It's spending more money on defense. All right. And he'll do what he can to try to get them to do that. Ironically, logically, when you look at the countries that are closer to Russia, okay, when you look at Poland, when you look at the Baltic states, they spend a higher percentage of their GDP, okay, on defense because they're kind of on the front line, right? Okay. But when you look back like at France, it lags. When you look at some of these other countries, if you will, that, they're fairly large countries that have fairly large economies, they're not doing their part, if you will. So, Trump says a lot of things, okay, but those things are walked back.
Well, with all due respect, though, Dave,
yeah,
he campaigned on getting out of NATO. He literally campaigned that he was going to pull himself from NATO.
That's not going to happen.
No, but that's what he said.
Well,
but the thing is, again, when during the campaign we were told to take him at his word because he's a man, he says what he means. But then we go on and have to translate and walk back everything he says. So we cannot have it both ways and give him this so much rope saying, well, he's not a regular. He's been running since 2000. He actually ran multiple campaigns. He's a politician. He knows how to work the crowd, but we are sitting here giving him extra rope saying, well, he is. So we can't, that's the issue there.
I think it depends on the issue, Jutovi. I mean, he said, for example, that he was going to secure the border, immediately. He did. Okay. I think it's in infinitely better shape than it was, but it'll never be perfect. But the bottom line is let's see what happens. Okay, he's not the first politician that said things to get elected that ended up doing different things after they were in office. So,
he is the first that we've given so much leeway to allow him to screw up, because when you're saying that he secured the border, all he did was put on a show with Dr. Phil and show people being deported. And he hasn't even deported more than Obama did because Obama was a deporter in chief.
No, I know that.
So
but
all this stuff was
the numbers of people crossing the border have gone down 95%. Rick,
it was going down under Biden.
I want to talk about. We know about two of the parties in this conflict. We know how Trump is. We know that Putin is a terrible guy. Let's talk about Zelensky.
Okay.
So, and Sasha can correct me if I screw anything up, but Ukraine becomes an independent country in 1991 when the Soviet Union falls. However, they're not really independent. They have incredibly corrupt governance that is in Russia's pocket. The international community has been pushing for decades to squeeze the corruption out of Ukraine's government so they can stand independently against Russia. Now, Zelensky comes along, and Zelensky is independently wealthy. He's worth about $20 million from being a TV.
$100 million.
Okay, 100 million from being a TV star, a movie star, and a producer in Ukraine. He makes a TV show where he portrays he's the president on this fictional show. So he learns about what it takes to be the president, and he decides, I should run for president. This is a job I could probably do. And the deal is, people like to say about Trump that Trump is worth so much money he can't be bought. Now that's questionable, but in the case of Zelensky, that seems to be actually true. He's not in it to make a ton of money. He already had a ton of money, and he seems to be trying to do the right thing for Ukraine, including this latest thing saying, if you get us in NATO, I will quit. So, Sasha, is that correct? He seems like a good, not corrupt guy.
You're right. He cannot be bought. That's for sure. There is another thing is that Zelensky, funny enough, as much as Trump's team negotiated with Russia, they're not negotiating about peace at all. They spend their time to open all the Russian consulates in the United States so they will have more of their spies there. And that's all what they're talking about. There's no talks about peace. Ukraine hold the keys. And if Ukraine really wants to snap Trump and show him his place, they should keep rejecting, not at once, but just, this agreement, we looked at it, we don't like it, you have to change this and this and that and that. No, frankly, Ukraine, if they wanted to help Trump, they would sign the first agreement, because this is so stupid agreement. David, think about it. They're talking about $500 billion worth of rare earth minerals. The annual world market for these minerals is about $11 million or so. It's minuscule. It's nothing. So, and especially to get this off the ground and really develop it, it will take 15, 20 years, enormous amount of money. Trump is not going to be around if and when it will be implemented. So Ukraine might get as well, but they didn't want to help Trump at all. So Trump will come to Congress and say, look, Biden was helping them millions of trillions of dollars with billions. And here is what I got. I got $500 billion just with one signature or so on. So Zelensky didn't want to help him even then. So obviously these agreements, all these negotiations are doomed. Russia hasn't made even single concessions. Ukraine is not going to do either. So this is doomed. Trump, bye-bye, go home and say, sorry, I failed. Sorry, I didn't make it.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, but I had a quick question for you. And I may have brought it up before because y'all were talking about the defense spending, and we, some people, particularly on the left, talk about the prison industry as well. So I was just wondering your thoughts as to whether Doge needs to tackle that industry as well, because we do know that a lot of that is privatization kind of companies that have been there for a number of years, and it is on both the federal and the state level and everything like that. So I just wondered, do you personally think that this is something that Doge needs to be having in its foray of things that they are looking into, this whole notion of how we are handling the penal system here in the United States?
I think that's fair game for them to take a look at that. Obviously, they're going to look at the areas where they think there's a lot more money involved, and they're also going to look at the areas which were high priorities for the president in his campaign, and that's what they're doing so far. But that area should not be off the table. That's for sure.
Okay. Just really quickly, and then I'm going to tease you just lightly because I don't know if it's your game or not your game or everything. But one thing that I'd heard about Trump, I think it came out yesterday, was apparently, and this was put out last year as well, apparently we might have to investigate the golf courses as well, because I did hear that of the 30 days, he has spent about 10 of them already on the golf course and all along those lines. So maybe he's becoming the golfer in chief in addition to the president in charge.
Yeah, I don't know, but I can tell you this. I mean, he's obviously high energy. He's obviously engaged, and he's had more interactions with the public, in the first 30 days than most presidents do in a year.
So
good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, that's just,
he does seem to be pretty peppy lately.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
But so I've got a question about Trump or somebody saying that we're going to return 20% of the Doge savings to the American people. And A, this seems inflationary, and B, somebody associated with Doge says they've saved 55 billion so far. And if you do the math, 20% of that is 11 billion, which works out to be about $33 per American. So is there anything reasonable about, returning the savings?
Well, first, the claimed savings are overstated. Okay. Secondly, the $5,000 per is supposed to be per household. It's my understanding. Okay. And it was based upon the assumption that they were going to save $2 trillion, which is not going to happen. Okay. And I think, frankly, it's a dumb idea. I think you hadn't come on a little bit earlier when I said I've been pretty active on social media to say you don't give a dividend when you're losing $2 trillion a year and you have a significant negative net worth. In addition, you don't give a rebate when you haven't when we haven't fully paid for the product or service. The companies who end up doing those kinds of things tend to go bankrupt. So we don't want to do that.
David, the way I understand economics is that the savings, whatever Musk can generate, if and when, it doesn't add any cash in the till. It will just reduce the debt or make it less than it should have been the plan. So there's no cash being generated by doing that. But 5,000 to each family, it is real cash that has to come from somewhere. So you have to borrow additional billions of dollars to pay this 5,000 per family. And in my opinion, the only effect of it is that if they want, and if not if, of course they want, to make tax cuts to the rich people, this is a mechanism, actually, how they can do it. Instead of borrowing more money to decrease taxes, they can say, well, we paid every family $5,000. And then they will decrease taxes. So this is a double whammy for U.S.
I think it's a dumb idea, and I don't think it's going to happen.
I thought
David, I have a little issue with that because Doge is saying they've saved 55 billion, and we expect that number to be inflated. In other words, they really didn't save 55 billion. But here's the problem I have with that. Let's say they did save 55 billion. This year, the interest on the national debt is 892 billion. Okay, if your interest on the national debt is 892 billion and you save 55 billion, you didn't do anything. Am I missing something? In other words, it's a complete waste. They really need to up their game, or they don't have any.
My view is the only time that you would give a dividend, okay, is after we get debt to GDP down to a reasonable and sustainable level, and we have a surplus. Then you give a dividend. But until we get debt to GDP down to a reasonable and sustainable level, you don't give any dividends because that's already too high. We already have a huge negative net worth. Okay. By the way, that interest number is really understated because that doesn't count the interest that we have to pay on intragovernmental debt, debt for Social Security and Medicare and civilian and military pensions, retiree health care. So the actual number is about 25% bigger than that, which, so the number one line item in the U.S. budget is Social Security. Number two is interest. Number three is, I think, Medicare. Number four is defense.
Okay, David, my next question is, what can Doge do? What department can they cut to reduce the interest on the national debt?
Well, it depends upon whether you're talking about reducing interest as compared to what it would be if they didn't take the action or actually reducing the interest. The answer is they can do something on number one, but not on number two, because as long as we continue to add debt, then we're going to have to pay more interest. But it's a function of two things. It's a function of how much debt you have and what the effective interest rate is. And if you look at what's happened to interest rates since the election, they've gone up about 100 basis points for the 10-year. And so that means that not only are we going to have to pay higher interest because we have more debt, but we're going to have to pay higher interest because the interest rates have gone up. And I think there are several market signals that say that we got to start taking steps to put our finances in order. One is what I just said. The second is the gold price. The third is the efforts by the BRICS to try to come up with an alternative reserve currency. There are other signals out there as well that I think we're not paying enough attention to. Oh, the last one is the fact that we're having to borrow more money, and yet China, Japan, and other nations who historically have bought a great bulk of our debt are reducing their appetite. So all those things say when you do economics 101, those are pressures to increase rates over time.
Okay, look, we do have a question from one of our viewers, David. He wants to know what cuts or steps have Doge taken. Has he hurt the debt ceiling more than helped it?
Well, Doge has done some cuts, but the main cuts that Doge has done are RIFs. Because they can't cut appropriations. Only Congress can cut appropriations. Let me give you an example. They cut contracts that are DEI contracts. Those are appropriated funds. One of the dumbest things about our system is when Congress appropriates funds for things, it's both a ceiling and a floor. You can't spend more than that, but you're supposed to spend it. All right, unless you ask for permission to reduce your appropriation. And so in effect, what they're doing is to the extent they're canceling contracts, they're freeing up money that can be used for something else, unless the president asks for the Congress to rescind those funds, and therefore that would be a real cut. But that hasn't happened yet, and that's just GAO has something called financial benefits. The last year that I was at GAO, we had $55 billion in financial benefits for that year. Okay. And our budget was $500 million. So we had 110 to 1 return, $110 return for every dollar invested in the agency. But we were honest about how we characterized it. We called it financial benefits because in some cases it resulted in cuts. In other cases, it resulted in freeing up funds that could be used for higher priorities because, as I said, only Congress can cut.
Yeah, and only Congress can cut, but we need to cut our show because we're at the hour. I want to thank the Honorable David M. Walker and, of course, to Toby, who's always here with a question at the end. And we'll see you next week on. We'll see you next week. The Honorable David M. Walker. Take care.
Right.